Chapter 20 Aftermath Dawn was not far removed when we were finally able to enjoy a quiet moment back in our suite at Shepherd's Hotel. The remnants of Chu Sanfu's organization were incarcerated, and certain cables had been dispatched to London. Colonel Grey, at Holmes's orders, had been placed in charge of the wind-up of the affair, and had shielded us from numerous congratulations from the army and civilian authorities. It was generally accepted that the crisis was over, and we had been able to drag ourselves from the area of decision-making. Tiny and Burlington Bertie were snoring lustily in an adjacent room as Orlov joined Holmes and myself for a libation. Though I usually did the honors, on this occasion it was the sleuth who presided over the bottles. It was mighty comforting to sit at peace with the world for a change, with a brandy and soda in my hand. Holmes and I had carefully refrained from making mention of Orloff's crashing through the window of Chu Sanfu's headquarters, and his split-second rescue of my friend and possibly myself as well. This would have but embarrassed him. There were still matters of policy, and Orloff posed them promptly. What of the tomb in the Valley of the Kings? That whole matter is suppressed, stated Holmes, quickly. The boiling pot has subsided, and if we wish to keep it that way, let us have no sensational discoveries or anything else to draw attention to this area for the moment. Orloff nodded. Gray's men circulated the rumor for the false prophet quite well, and now that Chu Fu will just disappear, the whole furor will die down. Well, of course, I interjected. The story in the newspaper should have disposed of it already, the sword being in England, and I allowed my voice to dwindle to a stop, for both of my companions were regarding me strangely and possibly with a suggestion of mirth. "Good fellow," said Sherlock Holmes, "do always believe me. However, I must confess that there was no story in the Al-Ahram or any other paper. As far as we are concerned, there is no sacred sword. My tall tale was simply a ruse to have Chu dispatch one of his men outside the building. This was the prearranged signal for Tiny and Bertie and Orlov here to hit the place, backed up by the locals. I realized that we might be in a tight spot and wanted our lads on the scene first, should a rescue be required. A good thing I did. The truth was finally seeping through my lethargic brain. "We were followed from the hotel, then?" Holmes nodded. "And not just by Shadow Shady. It was, to use the jargon of the American underworld, a loose tale. We made ourselves available in the area where I suspected that Chu San Fu was hidden, and let whatever was to happen, happen. Once Orlov knew where we had ended up, he moved in with the reinforcements, and waited for the appearance of one of Chu's men before rushing the building. Exactly. There were holes in the plan, but it was the best I could come up with. Obviously you felt I was courting capture, Watson, and you were right. Chu had to be disposed of in some manner. That he went by his own hand, proved convenient. I did not choose to comment on this. The Oriental had fallen on the remnants of the sword and had been skewed by it. But I had heard the sound of Orloff's reinforced hat when it hit the man. Possibly he was dead before he reached the floor, but such conjecture served no purpose, and I dismissed it from my mind. "Then it's back to London?" asked Orloff. "By way of Berlin," replied Holmes, to my astonishment. "I have a little duty to perform there, and Gray is giving me a hand." Holmes had risen from his chair and was looking out the window towards the street and the star-studded Egyptian sky, just now tinted with the first rosy hue of the coming day. While I was digesting this new idea, Orlov returned to a subject he had mentioned previously. "There's liable to be another offer of knighthood. Will you accept this time?" "Little chance. I rather fancy I ruffled some feelings with my first refusal. In any case, I have already been amply rewarded for this singular adventure." I was about to question Holmes regarding this when he turned towards Orlov and me suddenly. "You know, it was the scheme of a Mad Hatter, but it would have worked." "Oh, come now, Holmes," I remonstrated automatically. "You have been too close to it, old fellow. Never mind your thoughts. What of the dock worker in London, the tailor in Paris, the German baker and their cousins everywhere? They read of the discovery of an unknown tomb, the first of its kind ever revealed to the eyes of modern man. The seals of the inner door are as they were when the crypt was closed over 3,000 years ago, and inside are the golden tablets with a new concept of the first prophet of Allah." "How would Chu have worked that?" asked Orloff shrewdly. "The inner door was stone. Chu could have effected an opening and slid the tablets through into the interior of the tomb. I imagine that such an opening, not large enough for a man, could have been concealed readily enough. I tell you it would have shaken the foundations of more religions than that of Islam. You forget the spell that this strange land can weave. What of the man you mentioned, Watson? Charles Piazzi Smythe, of our century, not without impressive credentials. He was an Astronomer Royal of Scotland, you know, and was absolutely convinced, and convinced untold others, that the measurements of the inside of the Great Pyramid foretold the entire history of the human race." I suppressed a yawn and rose to my feet. "Come now, Holmes, you have solved this problem, so let us not spend good time on might-have-beens. This adventure is over." A retrospection. I was wrong, for Holmes's adventures seldom end swiftly. Conclusions take a while, as they did in the tragic Burlstone matter and others that I could mention. Holmes and I did return to Baker Street by way of Berlin. In the German capital, the sleuth returned the two golden tablets to their legal owner, Herr Mannheim, the great collector. The industrialist got them back in their original form since Holmes, aided by Gray, had convinced Memory Max that he had best obliterate his forgeries and return the original secret writings to their surface. Holmes can be very persuasive when he is of a mind. Herr Mannheim decided to drop his charges against the misguided Heinrich Hoblein, and some 6 months later, due to the great influence of the steel tycoon, young Hoblein was released from jail. As to whether he became reconciled with his father, Shadow Shady, I do not know. Sometimes in the dark of night I shudder at the thought that Holmes and I might have loosed two men who could walk up walls on an unsuspecting public. But it did seem like the sporting thing to do at the time. The final resolution to the case came round the time of Houblein's release. I was looking for our checkbook, and without thinking opened the upper left-hand drawer of the desk, which was usually locked for Holmes kept private papers within. Right on the top was a sheet of notepaper carefully mounted between two pieces of glass. I observed that it was resting on what I assumed was the letter from Irene Adler. I had no intention of viewing Holmes's confidential mementos, but I could not fail to recognize the paper and the ink scrawled words upon it, for I knew them by heart. Holmes. At the cry of the jackal, I shall attack from the rear with a detachment of light horse. Yours for victory, Watson. Now I knew what Holmes meant when he said he had been amply rewarded for our singular adventure.